Come on and celebrate the resurrection of our Lord. Celebrate Jesus, celebrate. Celebrate Jesus, celebrate. Celebrate Jesus, celebrate. Celebrate Jesus, celebrate. Celebrate. All hail King Jesus. All hail Emmanuel. King of kings, Lord of lords, bright morning star. And throughout eternity, I'll sing his praises. And I'll reign with him throughout eternity. All hail King Jesus. All hail Emmanuel. King of kings, Lord of lords, bright morning star. And throughout eternity, I'll sing his praises. And I'll reign with him throughout eternity. And throughout eternity, I'll sing his praises. And I'll reign with him throughout eternity. I sing praises to your name, oh Lord, praises to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. I sing praises to your name, oh Lord, praises to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. I give glory to your name, oh Lord, glory to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. I give glory to your name, oh Lord, glory to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. For your name is great and greatly to be praised. For your name is great and greatly to be praised. Hi there. It's okay, let it run, Johnny. Let it run, Johnny. You gotta go back. You're on the wrong one. There you go. There you go. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my will and make it Thine. It shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is Thine own. It shall be Thy royal throne. It shall be Thy royal or kill the channel.
Need to start finding Esther. We're going to finish up Esther tonight. We're gonna let the aftermath be homework. We'll summarize it, and if you want to read the aftermath, you can study that privately. But we're gonna wrap up the story and the plot moments of these main characters. I don't think that theme music is very fitting to the story that we're going to hear tonight. But we'll get there. Let's pray. God, we confess our great need of you, your Spirit, your grace, your love, your fellowship, and the fellowship with your church. Lord, as we look at this text that seems so distant, Lord, may your Spirit bring us to what it tells us about you in its way. Help us to hear your voice. Come and be our teacher. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, look at the board. I know this is terrible, but I keep finding the shape very interesting. I'm going to grab my shepherd's crook. We're going to call this a laser pointer. All right, so we started. Part of the interesting thing about Esther is that it is a U shape, and it ends where it began. We have the king of Persia and his greatness. We have Haman elevated. We're going to end with Mordecai's greatness and Mordecai elevated. So you see we have these two things parallel along here. We have Haman's plot to kill the Jews, Mordecai's decree to spare the Jews. We have Esther and Mordecai working to reverse the decree. They do reverse the decree. We have Esther's first banquet. We have Esther's second banquet. And tonight we are right here, okay? The reason this is the point of the great reversal. At this point, what we can see is that the story almost repeats itself in reverse after the moment of the great reversal. We come down, we reverse, we go back out just like we came, okay? So I kind of crafted it in a way that we could use the first two sermons on Esther to get to this point, almost to this point, and then we could stop. And then we could do the great reversal, which is going to happen right out of the bat tonight. We're going to reverse the whole thing, and then we're going to back it back out, and we're going to see. Now, there's a few things about Esther that are very interesting. God is not a character in Esther. He is an unseen assumption. The explanations for this are myriad and different. The most compelling to me being that after 4 generations in exile, they had simply learned how not to talk about it or had forgotten. The interesting thing about this, though, is we as the reader are invited to see God as the unseen force working his faithfulness out, even in a group of people that have seemingly forgotten him, or are working hard not to talk about him, one of the two, however you look at that. Okay? So, now what we've had so far, we need to recap for just so that we can start fresh. Esther became queen of Persia through a grotesque contest, okay? A revolting contest. Then we fast forwarded a few years. And Esther is, 20-ish at this point. Now, there was a bad guy named Haman. What did Haman do that made him a bad guy? Shepherd, what do you say? He made a decree that what? All the Jews should be killed. You see, Haman had a lot of honor, but there was this one guy that wouldn't honor him. What's that guy's name? Mordecai. So when Haman would ride out as the king's second in command, everybody would bow down except for Mordecai, who watched him with disdain. And this really bothered Haman. He started to say, hey, man, I didn't do that on purpose. It just happened. I'll just go with it. I shouldn't have said that. I'm Haman, this guy. Who is this guy? He's nothing. Why did he bow down to me? Why is this happening? He said to his family, even if I have all the honor in the world, this guy doesn't bow down to me. And so, out of this fury, he crafted a decree with King Xerxes, who's kind of a doofus, that on this certain day, that all the Jews could be destroyed. Okay? Now, in response to this, Queen Esther, who is secretly a Jew, has now begun working to be able to bring about the rescue of her people. She risked her life, she went into Xerxes, and her request was not save my people, it was what? Come to my banquet, okay? They had a first banquet, and this is the evening after that first banquet. But at the first banquet, her only request was come to my second banquet, okay? So this is where we are. Let's read. 1 through 9, Esther 6. Oops, I didn't turn the page. Okay. That night the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. But when Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed upon its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on a horse throughout the city, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. And we're going to stop there. Okay, lots of irony, lots of richness. Okay, so let's dig into it. This is the beginning of some real serious supernatural stuff. If we were going to tune our antennas in to trying to see Yahweh working behind the scenes for the good of his people, even though his people may or may not be asking for it, this is where we need to tune in. Because the one thing that we left off on our little summary is that just the night before, Haman was so mad at Mordecai that his family advised him to do what? Build a pole, a killing pole. The reason I'm being facetious about that, and you'll notice this, some of the Bibles are going to say gallows, and some of them are going to say impaled. It literally, in the Hebrew, is a pole, a killing pole. So what we do then is we go back and try to figure out, did the Persians around this time, did they hang people? The NIV went with impaling. They like to sharpen the end of the stick and put the dude on it. But it doesn't matter. It's a public killing. And he set up a really high pole to kill Mordecai. They gave him the advice. They said, if Mordecai bugs you so much, just kill him. The king will give you whatever you want. And so he set up this pole. So he comes in. Now, on the very night that this happened, the king, what's the problem with the king? He can't sleep. And, I mean, he doesn't go turn on YouTube or the news or whatever it is that you do. What does he decide for his entertainment? He wants to be read to from the court records, all right? So in the spirit with this, Joy has offered that if you can't sleep tonight, she will come read you the minutes from tonight's business meeting. Isn't that great? That's exactly what he had done. He couldn't sleep. So, and the way it says it, what we're assuming is that he slept a while, woke up too early, because in this feverish state, he's going to discover and he's going to work on it first thing in the morning. So he says, bring the book of the Chronicles, and so they stand and they begin to read the court records to him. This is supernatural. God wakes him up in the night. God fills him with a desire to read the records. I mean, who would have thought if God was going to arrange for this miraculous redemption that he would begin with sleeplessness and a reading of the royal records, right? There's so many more heroic and interesting ways to do that. People sometimes speak of God orchestrating events behind the scenes of our lives, but the image may be a little misleading. An orchestrator decides what happens and gets the orchestra to do it. The Bible can portray God as doing so, but this is not the way it sees in this story or in all the events. While there's some sense in which God is sovereign over everything, sometimes the picture is more of God doing something creative with independent human actions and with the events after they happen. So they start reading from the events. God uses it, and he brings whom to the king's mind? Mordecai. They read that part and they say, let the record show that Mordecai brought to light the plot to kill the king. And what does the king think to himself? Oh, I forgot something. What did he forget? Got to take care of Mordecai. Got to reward Mordecai, right? This apparently seems like a big deal to Persian kings, that they reward favors. He goes, oh, what did we do for that guy? And the court reporter quickly says, nothing has been done for this guy. This is a problem. This is probably even a superstitious/religious problem to King Xerxes. When he remembers Mordecai's acts on his behalf, he is disturbed. Now, the supernatural continues because at that moment the king says, we got to do something. Who's in the court? Who happens to be walking in the door? Haman. The Bible records for us that Haman is coming in that moment to ask the king, hey, can I kill Mordecai? You know that little Mordecai guy? I'm so tired of him. It seems, actually, if you go back in the previous section, it's indicating he believes that he'll have a better time at tonight's banquet if we just go ahead and kill Mordecai. I'll feel better tonight if he's already dead. That'd make me feel better, right? So he comes in specifically with the purpose of asking the king for the permission to kill Mordecai, and the king catches him off guard. What's the king's question? Yeah, let's talk about that. What should I do to somebody I want to honor, right? So, you can picture this silly scenario. The king is musing, and he says, "What would make for a good reward for somebody?" When you were a kid in school, it was always a pizza party. That's for my generation. They'd go get a pizza, which if you lived in Cotton Center, that was considered ethnic food. And it had to come from over 30 minutes away. And so that meant that the poor teacher would drive to Plainview and get a pizza and come back. So it was very exciting for us. But he says, what would be a good reward, right? What would work? Now, what does Haman think? Thinks he's talking about him. For who would the king have to reward other than me? What does this tell us about Haman? Conceited, self-centered, proud, visions of grandeur, Disney does a good job at this sometimes because they have the villain, and the villain always has kind of a sniveling sidekick, and the sniveling sidekick thinks that they're way more important to the king than they really are, like the snake at the King Richard, who he bops on the head, boom. This is kind of what Haman is at this point. He thinks, "Oh, king, you are too kind." But thankfully, instead of tipping his hand, he goes ahead and explains his plan. What would he want to be honored? So how would you describe, what does Haman want to be honored at? Grandeur, a royal robe, a royal horse that the king has ridden. I want them both to have been worn by the king. The robe, the horse, everything. The crest on the head, that's right, Johnny. And this is, to me, the piece de resistance. What does he want? He doesn't want to just ride the horse. What does he want to happen? He wants not even like a servant to lead him. What does he want to lead him? A prince. I mean, wouldn't that be kind of funny? I mean, you say, "Hey, I'm going to get honored. I would like for a United States senator to drive me around, right? I'd like for him to be my chauffeur for the day, right?" This is what he says. "I want one of the king's most noble princes to walk before me, leading the horse." And at this point, we as the reader are invited into the irony. We can see the great reversal happening already. But he's just so, as he pours it on, you almost feel bad for the guy for just a moment. Okay, not yet. What does he even want to happen? He wants somebody to what? Yell over and over again as he leads him through the city. This is what, can you show me it so I can say it just right? No, you're fine. Go back one more. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Johnny. I ambushed you. Somebody holler it out. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. And then just keep going. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. I mean, humiliating. This would be humiliating if it wasn't your arch enemy. And so there stands Haman, having asked for his dream. I was listening to an autobiography the other day, and this little girl, she was born poor, very poor, and she was in a coma for weeks. And when she woke up, her grandmother said, "Is there anything I can get you?" And she goes, "Being poor, you know how to ask exactly for what you want." She says, "I want a full-size Rainbow Bright doll and a chocolate ice cream." That was one of her first words coming out of her coma. She said, like I said, being poor, I knew that you have to capitalize and ask right when you know when you get your opportunity. Haman capitalized, he asked, and here we go. Huh? Oh yeah, you would definitely think he's thought of this before.
But he made it as public and as lavish as
he could. I mean, honestly, let's be frank about this. Let's say that I decided I was going to honor you as deacon of the week or Sunday school teacher of the week or what it is. And I say, you're going to come into church riding on one of those chairs that they carry, and the people carrying it are going to holler out your greatness as a Sunday school teacher. Are you comfortable with this? No, you're not. Who said yeah? Did I hear a yeah? Was that you, Beth Ann? Right, that's what I was saying. The point is, you have to be what kind of person to think this is fun? Narcissist. Crazy. This is rich. And then let's take it, we're going to peek. We know Mordecai gets the treatment. Do you think Mordecai enjoyed it that much? I mean, really. Okay, so it's too much. It shows us that Haman is an over-the-top character. All right, so I wrote down some Proverbs. I was pulling them out of a commentary as I was reading because he liked to use Proverbs to accentuate the book of Esther because he talked about they have a lot in common in their timeline and stuff like that. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall.
Well, to give Haman just a little bit of credit,
Yeah?
once he made this suggestion, it was exactly what the king wanted.
This is true. Yeah, he nailed it. I mean, and you're right, Rocky. I see what he's saying. The king was like, that's a great idea. Haman learned how to play his audience, and his audience was King Xerxes. All right, let's read 10 through 14. Now remember, right now in verse 9, picture the smile on Haman's face. Verse 10 takes it away, but at verse 9, he is still a happy man. Verse 10. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman, yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be great? We need that snapshot. So Haman got the robe and the horse, and he robed Mordecai, and he led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief. He told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." And while they were still talking with him, the king's units arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Notice the rushness of verse 14 right there. We'll come back to it. It's intentional. While he's still considering his doom, it's time to go. You're late. Let's go. Get in the car. No time to change. Okay? All right. Now let's break this apart. The king says flamboyantly, "Go do it now." Rocky said, "You nailed it." Apparently the king was not aware of the deep animosity between Haman and Mordecai. He's just ignorant about it. People must have known. It must have been an enigma to them, and an extremely humiliating experience for Haman. This is the moment of the great reversal. From this point on in the story, and there's several chapters left, nothing goes right for Haman and nothing goes wrong for the Jews. Okay? This is the if you could stick a pin in, you would have two sides of that U-shaped thing. And so here's Mordecai riding on the horse. Here's Haman hollering. Mordecai and Haman know each other's. Even Mordecai knows the tension between him and Haman. Must have been just a great ride. I know. I gather that there would be people that enjoyed watching their enemy do that for them. I don't think I could even enjoy that. Now, Mordecai went back to his position. This is an interesting thing to have said. Mordecai knew there was important business at foot. What does Mordecai know? That Esther's what? Mordecai knows that Esther is preparing a banquet so she could do what? Right? Ask for a favor, save her people. Mordecai is in the zone. Haman is more, he's clueless. Mordecai goes right back to his position. He does not change his actions. He doesn't change the plan. He doesn't even change his location because of this flattery. This flattery is not going to change Mordecai. It's very intentional. The Bible put it together. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman went home to whine. Right? This is supposed to show us, Mordecai goes to a good position, a strategic position, a working position. He's back on task. From then on, after the great reversal, Haman is busted. Where does Haman go? Home. With his head covered in shame. Of course, if I led somebody through the streets like that, I'd go home, I'd call it a day too, and I'd be ashamed too. Covering the head symbolized grief, so Haman publicly showed his distress. In the meantime, Mordecai returns to the city gate. We talked about that. Now, when he tells his wife and his advisors everything that happened, the same people that last night told him to put up a 75-foot impaling pole now tell him what? You're doomed. What else do they see? What kind of nuggets of wisdom can we mine out of this? Since Mordecai, now look at this next sentence. Before whom your downfall has started. These are a superstitious people. They're a religious people, but we're not being very respectful of their religion, I guess, when I say that. But they're a superstitious religious people. When they see this sign of this reversal, Zeresh and the advisors get nervous, and they start to assume that God has turned against him and turned for the Jews. So they see it as a bad sign. The fact that you went in to kill Mordecai, and then you ended up this happening, your downfall has started. She's recognizing the tail end of the great reversal. Haman's described counselors, or wise men or experts, are the friends who have set him up for this. Now they express extraordinary insight about the danger into getting into conflict with the Jews. The story goes that the 18th century Prussian king, Frederick the Great, asked a member of his court for one compelling piece of evidence of God's existence. And this is one of those stories that's told in different ways. I even saw it in another commentary about Martin Luther. And their reply was, if there was one piece of evidence that proved the existence of God, they said it is the existence of the Jews. That their survival against all odds could not be explained except on the basis of God's involvement with them. And so we find this, and remember, this book of this book of Esther has been important to the Jewish identity in ways that are different than the rest of the scriptures, because it helps them with this diaspora or spread around nature of their existence, but it also helps them when the multiple times throughout history somebody decided they were going to stamp them out. Esther is their patron saint. It's their hero of standing in the face of proposed annihilation. And so this person in the book is recording the moment when Zeresh and the advisors knew, oh wait, you can't mess with the Jews. God will stop you. Their God will stop you. So even his wise advisors are tuned into this mysterious spiritual reality. And while they say, you can't stand against him, it's going to bust you up. If you have any hope of survival, it's because you reverse this course. And while he might be standing there to think about that, what happens? It's time to go. You're late. You got to get in the car, right? This is interesting. Haman is now the victim. Not really. He's the victim of the reversal. The reversal is happening, and Haman is in free fall. Even his wife is telling him, you're doomed. Before he has any chance to correct course, it's time to go. And he doesn't even realize yet whom he's going to face. Remember, what does he think he's going to? A banquet with what? King, queen. Previously, yesterday, how did he think about this banquet? It was great. It was exciting. He was bragging about it. I am the only one invited to Esther's banquet with the king, right? So maybe he's even got a little bit of hope, but no, he's in free fall. The great reversal has occurred. Haman is going down. All right, let's read. Chapter 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even half to the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he, the man who dared do such a thing?" And Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." And then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. And the king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in my house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." And the king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. And then the king's fury had subsided. Everybody feels better after a good impaling. That's all it takes to scratch your itch in this story. The great reversal continues. They're at banquet number 2. Haman probably still has a little hope. He's getting a little bit of honor for the king. Maybe he's going to come up with a plan B, move things around, all this stuff. The king gets right to business. He repeats the formula that not only do we see in Esther, but we see it in other Persian documents. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted to you. He addressed her as queen and asked to know her petition. He was still well disposed with her. This is more supernatural guidance from Yahweh. All right. Now, I want you to notice, if you read this too quickly, it is underwhelming as all get out. We must read it slowly. Look at verse 3. Look, watch the trembling hands of Esther. Watch the moment arrive. She fasted for 3 days before she even requested the first banquet. She got the first banquet and she requested the second banquet. We're talking days of lead up to this. Anxiety, fear for her life. Really, this is a test. And Esther doesn't know everything we know. Remember, we are an omnipotent reader. Just like in all literary stories, we are privy to more information than the characters are at this point. Esther does not know a lot of this. Esther is about to try the king's favor for her versus the king's favor for Haman, right? And even when you think you know, do you know? Do you know how it's going to end? And so Esther, with trembling hands, makes her request. And she establishes the ground rules. If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me. And up to this point, what is King Xerxes expecting? Half the kingdom, or stuff, a beautiful necklace, more attendants, a golden chariot, right? And she says, my life. This is my petition. Full stop at this point, right? Did King Xerxes expect that? What is he surprised? He's surprised. Why is he surprised? He doesn't know she's a Jew, right? He doesn't know she's in danger. Yeah, I mean, and really, this is a good argumentative technique. I'm not arguing. Don't get into the politics. Don't get into the Haman. Don't get into the court rules. Just ask simply. Let's get down to brass tacks. What I request is to keep my own life, right? All right, that's a good baseline, right? Second request, and spare my people, and the repetition, this is my request, right? Very reasonable, very wholesomely presented. The king must have been startled and perplexed. Why was Esther's life in danger? She did not tell him in this verse, even so far, who her people were. Esther realized that it was a life and death matter, and she risked her life to do something about it. Esther must have remembered Vashti's fate. and thought of the possible severity of her own actions. This does not stop her, but rather she continued her heroic actions. Esther identifies herself with her people and not by their name, right? She identified, yet, notice, and we're supposed to notice, she doesn't say the Jews, she's identifying with their fate. She does not know how the king would react. And she uses this has been sold line, right? Now, King Xerxes doesn't look extremely brilliant here. What is his first request that tells us he hasn't clued in yet? Who is he? Where is he? Repetition. The man who dared to do such a thing. Should he have figured it out by now? We would hope so. I don't know how busy he is, but we would think that he'd have figured it out right now. He doesn't realize that Haman, the one that wants to kill the Jews, is the one sitting at the table. Where is this man? How dare he threaten my queen? Right? And she says plainly, clearly, this vile Haman. She has made her case as strong and as clear as possible. By announcing Haman as the guilty person, she has finally revealed her Jewishness. Now, who have we lost sight of the last couple minutes? Haman, right? What's Haman doing? You know, like, you ever sat at a table when two people fought? You're just looking, oh, what's going on? What point do you think Haman clued in? And maybe he's a bonehead. Maybe he picked up on it when she said his name. He went, yeah, who is he? Me? Or maybe Haman's a little more cunning. Who knows? It is good, though. Esther made her case very plain, very strong. My only petition, you're thinking I want a kingdom. I don't want anything but my life. I only that in my people's life. She didn't get into politics. She didn't get into the process of decrees and the ring and all that stuff. That's details. Right now, what we need to talk about, my petition is for my life. That guy is the bad guy. And everything goes nuts. From there, this is one of the reasons it helps us to read that moment slow. You ever had one of those moments at the table where something that was said and it just almost feels like a bomb went off at the table? And everybody's anxious and now there's yelling and things like that. It happened. When Esther finally got it out and she finally got the accusation of Haman out, everything begins to move really quickly. Where does everybody go? Where does Xerxes go? He goes outside. That's my strategy. Go outside. Go out in the yard. Walk it off. And so he gets out. He goes. He leaves in a rage and he goes outside. Where does Haman go? To beg for mercy. Now, I had to read this a lot. I could not figure out what it was trying to describe. Now, but what I learned is that Persians ate reclining, a lot like we talk about the, I'm not going to get down to the floor. I always get down to the floor. I'll wait a lot like we always talk about the Last Supper. They ate on a couch. She's reclining with her elbow on the thing. So it seems that when Haman flung himself down on the couch, he's flinging himself at her feet. Right? Which makes a lot of sense because this whole problem started because Mordecai wouldn't do what? Fling himself down at the feet of Haman, right? So this is more of the great reversal, and that helps us see it. So what we think is that Esther remained reclining in the dining position. Haman threw himself down on that same cushion, probably began to grovel at her feet. Maybe he even began to kiss her feet. Who knows what's going on there, but it didn't look good. So he begins to beg for his life. Haman knew all of a sudden that the real power in the room was not with Xerxes, but with Esther. And the only chance he was going to have is the forgiveness of Esther. And after all this, Xerxes was willing to give up half his kingdom. And therefore, it seemed like he wouldn't hesitate to save his wife. Xerxes, as the great reversal keeps coming, Xerxes comes back in. He thinks that things are way worse than they look. He described, will he violate my wife even in my own house? and feet and ankles are considered kind of private. So if he was groveling at her feet, if her feet had become exposed, it would have been considered rather illicit. And so there is a form there. It looks pretty bad. And so when we look here, halfway through verse 8, as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. He probably said a one-word pronunciation of death, which just isn't recorded here for the sake of narrative. He probably went, take him away, or kill him. Or maybe he had a cool gesture like that. But whatever he did, as soon as the word left his mouth, they put a bag over Haman's head and he's out. All right? Haman does not have many friends in the palace at this point. How do we know that? They're rooting against him. And we meet this guy, what's his name? Harbona. Write that one down for a baby name someday. It's a pretty good dog name. I'll take that. And so as soon as they take and they put the bag over his, Harbona has what piece of devastating information? He set up the gallows, and he can't even just be content to say, hey man, I happen to know where some gallows are. I could take care of this for you. He throws in the really damaging information of what? These gallows were for Mordecai, and then he does not want his point to go missing. What did Mordecai do? He spoke up to help the king. I mean, he is just, boy, this Harbona guy is helpful right now. Right there on the point. Ultimately, Haman probably did not carry a lot of respect around the palace, and you could probably see why. Someone that will act this insecure towards Mordecai certainly acts this insecure towards his co-workers, or however you want to call them in other ways. So Harbona comes up with the information. I happen to know there's a really tall impaling pole. I happen to know it was supposed to be for that dude you love so much who saved your life. I think we should put these things together. The evil Haman planned for his enemy fell on him. A number of Proverbs express the truth of what happened here. According to Proverbs 11:6, the righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the unfaithful are trapped by evil desires. So Haman, gone, 75 feet in the air, by some method of execution. It comes to the point where we're not going to read the rest of it. So we have a problem to solve, right? What is the problem revolving around Persian law? Can't be revoked. This is an interesting plan. It is effective. It's supposed to make the king think really hard about his edicts, right? It's also supposed to stop me. Like, let's say King Chuck makes a law I don't like, and I get rid of King Chuck, I become King Josh. I can't immediately undo what King Chuck just did. It's sort of a prevention against violent regime changes. Although it seems pretty absurd to us, it does have a functionality. But regardless, King Xerxes can't do what? That's right. They have a scheduled date. If you missed that, Haman cast lots to find out what was the best day to kill the Jews, and it's in the future. So they have a future problem of, there was an edict that said that on that day in the future, you could kill all the Jews you wanted. And so they have a problem to solve. They can't just take it back. Okay, never mind on that. Never mind. And in fidelity to their own law system, they have to come up with a plan. And as modern Western readers, the plan just seems absurd or too complicated or something. The plan is this: let the Jews gather together to protect themselves. That's the plan. It makes you wonder, what were they going to do before? But now the Jews are allowed on this day to gather together and protect themselves. And if you go attacking the Jews and they kill you, they get your stuff, okay? There is a little bit of this. God's people don't return in like kind. Okay, like kind would have been, okay, on this day, we're going to go eliminate all of that kind of people, right? we're going to go hunting them, right? This isn't the way it's orchestrated. They are allowed to defend themselves. That's what they are allowed to, okay? But we still need a little bit of what? Yahweh's supernatural provision. That's where we are. We don't really have a militaristic solution. Do what? Oh, that was a kid. We don't really have a militaristic solution to make it happen. We have the ability for the Jews to protect themselves, and we are going to need Yahweh to step in and protect the people, which is wonderful because that is how it becomes the festival of Purim. They don't really think of the festival of Purim completely as the day Esther saved the world, but as the day Esther was used by Yahweh to provide for the continuation of their group, okay? That's how it became a religious thing. All right, so they come up with this. And Mordecai, on the far right-hand side of the U, Mordecai then takes the place of leadership that was previously occupied by Haman, completing the great reversal. Okay? Any detailed questions about Esther? Not that I'm an Esther expert, but anything came up in your head that you'd like to poke at? Okay, let's talk about some lessons from exile, and then we'll move on to this. Remember, this whole series is not about Esther. It's about life in exile, and that's where we're going to continue on with our rebuilding of Jerusalem. We're going to go back to Jerusalem when we gather together again. So, lessons of the exile. I think it's important to remember that in the story of Esther, we are seeing just the same way we did in Daniel, that God is the keeper of the covenant. God is the faithful one, right? When the people don't even know how or don't feel compelled to speak his name, what does God do? He honors his covenant. He keeps the covenant. Remember, even in our life as Christians, it is not our faithfulness that saves us, is it? Are you counting on that? I'm not. It's not much to count on. Whose faithfulness to the covenant is it that we count on? God's faithfulness, Christ's faithfulness to the covenant. This is a good lesson for an exile, okay? God keeps his promises when we are simply incapable. And that is actually our hope. The second thing, your status as a part of God's people makes you vulnerable, unvulnerable, and then vulnerable again sometimes. It is an interesting reality. Being God's people made them targets. Being God's people delivered them. And then being God's people still left them in harm's way, but with supernatural protection on the evening of Purim. We need to understand our culture can turn on us and can view us as part of the problem in the same way that the Persian culture viewed the Jews as part of the problem, okay? We can be seen, because of our association with the one true God, we can be seen as an antagonistic force to worldly ambitions, okay? It may happen, it may not happen, it might happen, unhappen, and then happen again. It doesn't speak to God's faithfulness. It speaks to our status as outsiders in this world where we live. All right, any other thoughts and questions about Esther?
I got one comment, not just about Esther, but something that I was reading the other day, listening to somebody else speak on TV, but it helps me understand how non-Jews and non-Christians think and write, especially when we talk about all the books of the Bible. But, and I think it would cover a whole time period. It would cover the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, all of that. But there's two things that they know about Jewish people. Number one, their beliefs are more ancient than theirs. Because Abraham goes back to nearly 2000 BC.
Yeah, okay.
The other ones don't go back that far.
Yeah, that's true.
And the one thing they know about the Jewish people is their God is monotheistic. There's only one God.
There's only one. It makes them very distinct in whatever culture they live in.
And I think even today, when you're talking about the things that Pilate was doing with Jesus himself,
Yeah.
you know, there was phrases in there that said that Pilate was afraid.
Yeah.
And it's not just that he's afraid that the people of go back to Rome and call him in front of some court, but he wants to make sure he treats Christ right because he knows the history.
Yeah, that there is a one God system. Thank you, Rocky. Great points. Thank you. Anything else? All right, let's transition to business meeting. Make sure if if we got some legs, that you have this and you have the budget proposal, because we're going to deal with both of them. Got my laser pointer.